Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I want to talk about some NBA teams that don't necessarily need to blow it up, because I think that's been something that has been blown out of proportion a little bit at times over the last couple of years among some fans. But these teams just need to try some new things, whether it's a lateral move or something a lot more dramatic. Any kind of change would show a desire for progress and would hopefully end up resulting in some kind of real, tangible movement forward and progression forward for these teams. And so with those boundaries set, I'm going to go and begin by talking about the Detroit Pistons. They just won 41 games. They lost in the first round of the playoffs, and it just kind of seems like they've been stuck in a rut for the last couple of seasons of being right in that 40-ish win territory and never really making that much noise in the postseason or showing that much progress towards becoming a top 4 or 5 team in the Eastern Conference. And I'll even give them the benefit of the doubt going into this season. Let them play 30 or so games and see how this season goes. Maybe their off-season additions plus their draft picks will push them up in the standings a bit, and this will be an entirely unnecessary rambling on my part talking about some moves that they need to make. But if, predictably, things are about the same as they were last year, then maybe they should try to change some things up. They have 3 players with significant value right now, those being Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, and Reggie Jackson to a much lesser extent. Jackson is an expiring contract that could, in theory, provide good point guard minutes to a contender, especially if they suffer an injury. Maybe at the deadline, a team that's looking to contend needs some more help at that spot. Reggie Jackson is someone that can help them do that and is also an expiring contract, so that provides a little bit more value as well. Andre Drummond is still in his mid-20s, but makes over $50 million combined over the next 2 seasons, and his skill set doesn't necessarily have great value as kind of like a garbage scorer in the paint, a really good rebounder, but maybe something that isn't so difficult to replicate. But to the right team, he could definitely bring back some assets. And then Griffin's value is never going to be higher than it is right now. After a relatively healthy season, putting up some great statistics, he does have 3 years left, making in the mid $30 million range. And I would just promote the idea of maybe letting someone else pay for the rest of that contract and getting back some value in return if I was the Pistons. And again, this isn't necessarily a they need to blow it up kind of thing. Maybe just try some different combinations in the front court. Maybe get a really good wing in a trade for someone like Blake Griffin. Just do some different things like the title of the video suggests and see where that takes you, as opposed to just continually doing the same thing over and over again. Speaking of doing the same things over and over again, and most specifically not being very successful at it, next up is the Phoenix Suns. And I get that they are still so young and they have pieces like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and Dario Saric and Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. But if it doesn't start to click this season, then I'm starting to doubt that it never will. This is a team that hasn't won 25 games over the last 4 years. Their win total seems to be going down despite their relative talent level seeming to increase. And they do have some money coming off the books in 2020, but they also just re-signed guys like Kelly Oubre, and they'll have to pay for the recently traded for Saric to keep him. And then in 2022, Ayton winning a new deal as well. And it just doesn't seem like they've pressed the right buttons during this rebuild. They've missed on too many draft picks. They didn't take advantage of Booker being on his rookie deal, and now they'll never be able to take full advantage of their now half-decade-long rebuild. As a result, you have to hit on more draft picks than what they have to this point, and the only 2 really tangible, good players that they know are going to be good moving forward that they have on their roster are Booker and Ayton. Everybody else is a relative question mark, which makes you think that maybe there are some moves to be made. Like, you could certainly make a very drastic case for them to trade Devin Booker and just build around Ayton, seeing as how he is now on a max deal, should provide a ton of value to a different team. That seems a little bit drastic to me. I would try and get a legit all-star point guard to play alongside Booker and Ayton and see what they're like in that scenario. See what they have with those 2 guys before doing anything crazy drastic like trading Booker and or Ayton. And just so we're clear, I'm not qualifying Ricky Rubio in the category of all-star caliber point guard that needs to play next to Booker and Ayton. If they can package together maybe Saric, maybe Bridges, maybe Johnson, maybe Rubio once they're able to trade him at midseason for a really good point guard alongside those guys, I think that would be a better way to evaluate how good this core is, how good that duo is moving forward. And like I said, just change something up, because just having Booker and now Ayton at this point hasn't worked, although obviously it's only 1 year into those 2 being on the same team. And if it doesn't work long term for whatever reason, it's much better to know that now rather than later, which brings us to a team that's in a similar situation to Phoenix, and that's the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've had a great young player for years, just like the Suns have had, although in this scenario, it's Karl-Anthony Towns, and they just didn't take advantage of the rookie deal that he was on, and now he's on a max contract, which makes it significantly more difficult to bring in help for their young players. Now they do have Jarrett Culver plus Robert Covington as two nice complementary pieces around Karl-Anthony Towns, even though neither of them might really turn into any kind of big star, but they need to use the assets they do have, for example, Jeff Teague's expiring contract, to gain assets and probably move Andrew Wiggins and Gorgui Dieng's deals in the process as well, ideally, because if they had the flexibility to do so this offseason, it seemed like they could have landed D'Angelo Russell to a max deal in free agency this year. It seemed like that was where the momentum was going before he ended up going to Golden State, and that obviously would have been a really good pairing with Karl-Anthony Towns as a kind of player that they really need on this team that they weren't able to get because of their lack of flexibility. So again, they need to get out from under some money and figure everything else out after. Use Teague to do so, and maybe trade Covington as well to be able to do that, and prioritize getting high-level players around Karl-Anthony Towns, not so much the Teague and Wiggins types that they've surrounded him with to this point. Which brings us to another team with a big star that could potentially be on the market over the next 12 months or so, and that's the Washington Wizards. And I've been advocating for a Beal and Wall trade for this team for weeks now, and even probably for longer at this point. And it seems like Beal is unlikely to sign the max extension that Washington is going to extend him, which sets him up for 2021 free agency. And if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that stars that want to get traded in the NBA and officially request it do get moved. So why not get ahead of the curve? There's no way that if Bradley Beal requests a trade that the Wizards are not going to eventually move him in advance of his 2021 free agency. So why not get ahead of that and have that leverage of knowing that you are at least ahead of this and knowing that he wants to get moved before anybody else does. Dump Wall's money, use Beal to get some picks and future assets, and give the new front office a clean slate to work with, along with basically the only other player that they have on the roster that shows any kind of promise, Rui Hachimura. Just use this as an opportunity to give it, like I said, the front office, the new front office, a clean slate and see what they can do with it. Because even if you keep Bradley Beal, you're probably going to lose him for nothing in 2 years. And every day that you wait, your leverage decreases as teams become more and more certain that he is not long for Washington. So get ahead of the curve and just go ahead and make that move. That would be my plea to the Wizards. And they're probably most in the blow it up category of any team on this list, which brings us to the last team on this list, and it's the Charlotte Hornets. And they are in probably the worst spot of any team across the entire league. Not that they don't have any hope, because we've seen teams recover from much, much worse over the last couple of years, most specifically the Brooklyn Nets. But at the moment, they have next to zero proven young talent. They do have some maybes like Bridges and Rozier and Malik Monk and PJ Washington and maybe even Dwayne Bacon, but apart from that, they do have players with value. It's not all bad. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is an expiring contract and a versatile enough defensive player to maybe get some assets in return. Marvin Williams certainly has value as an expiring contract and as a stretch four, most importantly to a contender. And hey, even maybe Nick Batum's shooting could catch someone's eye in the right circumstance and get back some kind of asset, or at least get out from under his contract. And my plea to them in terms of changing things up would be, don't just sit around and wait. Don't just sit around and wait on your mid-lottery level draft picks to become something. Don't just sit there and wait on contracts to expire. Make some moves. Take advantage of the very small amount of assets that you do have, because just waiting around didn't work with Kemba Walker, and it's not going to work now with a significantly lower talent base than what you've had over the last couple of years. So like I said, just make some moves, change some things up. Even if it's a lateral move, even if it's turning Nick Batum into 2 expiring contracts, that's a win. Make incremental progress, and that would be kind of my advice to all the teams on this list. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a whole bunch of different opinions to share with me on what you think these teams should do, what other teams maybe you think should be trying to change things up as well. But that is going to be the end of today's video. I thank you all for watching. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.